it's, you know, as all normal people, although they're not such great villains, I wanted to see, I would crave to see that the third part, which was the last one to be short, where you finally learn how Eve emerged, how did Anakin Skywalker become Darth Vader. And the film fails there, of course, miserably. But that's, you know, but nonetheless there is one useful notion that you find in the film. This idea of as they put it, disturbance in the field of force. No? That is to say, the idea is to put it in Buddhist terms. We don't, and there are some mysterious, I know, passages in some of Tibetan Buddhist stuff which point in this direction. That, because to put it, it's not simply we have nirvana and then samsara, the field of false pathological disturbance, which is not yet, we are caught in desire, in false craving, and that would be drive, I think. Drive is this, the very nirvana, spiritual enlightenment getting wrong. And this is why I think that the basic retooling is my dream, to shoot a new version of Star Wars, where precisely the bad guys would be rehabilitated. And I am even tempted to put it in Marxist terms, like, why should they be bad? I'm like a French Japanese revolutionary. I would say the Emperor and Darth Vader are a kind of a little bit authoritarian, okay, but a kind of authoritarian, democratic, egalitarian, centralized things. And who are these stupid Jedi? Some corrupted old feudals and so on and so on. It's kind of a, you know, like French Revolution. It's like Robespierre crashing Vendée and all that shit there and so on. No? I would love to do this different version of it. No? So, okay, getting to my main point. I hope now you go. This is again the mystery, which is the deepest mystery, I think, of Buddhism. And again, there are some speculations in Tibetan Buddhism very unclear. You know where you can find? I will stop immediately. Yeah? You know, the longer I talk, the less debate afterwards. So I want to hypocritically play this game of, I would so much like to stay longer, but unfortunately not. Because, you know, don't misunderstand me, I love dialogue, but I love late Plato's dialogues. You know how they do. One guy talks all the time, every 10 minutes the other guy says something like, yes, by you. That's the dialogue. Okay, let's go on. What I don't have time to do, okay, just to hint where I wanted to go on. Where do we find this minimal, almost, I'm tempted to say, pre-ontological effusive involvement? It continues to move. What is its ontological state? Again, back to Kant, it is what Kant called indefinite judgment. You probably know that in Kritik der reinen Vernunft, Kant opposes negative and indefinite judgment. Let's say we have, okay, to go directly to the example I'm aiming at. Let's take the negative, the positive judgment, he is dead. Let's first do the negative judgment. This is for Kant the judgment which negates the predicate, which is he isn't dead. No problem, it means he's alive, no? But what if we do what Kant calls infinite or indefinite judgment and we don't negate the predicate, we affirm a non-predicate. We don't say he isn't dead, we say he is undead. Oh my God, if you know Stephen King and so on, something totally new emerges. He isn't dead, it's not the same as he is undead. He isn't dead, he's alive. He is undead, it's the monstrosity of the living dead, neither the one nor the other. And I claim that this precisely, this monstrosity, which is precisely, let's say, the monstrosity, they were like living dead. You remember the scene that I evoke from Balanchine, the bodies which go on dancing even when the music stops and so on and so on. So this is ontologically, if you want, the domain of drive, this spectral undeadness, which is why, again, as I emphasize all the time, be very careful when you read Freud. Freud was almost always blinded by his own discovery. He often confused Todd Street with Nirvana principle, but I think Todd Street is the exact opposite of Nirvana principle. Nirvana principle is boring, I want to disappear in nothingness, blah blah. Todd Street is precisely something which insists its undeadness in the obscene horror stories term. So if you want to find a figure of Todd Street, maybe like it's the undead, vampires and so on, this obscene immortality, that's the message of Freudian Todd Street. That it's not only the noble, sublime immortality, that's a kind of obscene other immortality. That is to say, that would be my final paradox, that what Freud calls Todd Street is paradoxically his psychoanalytic name for immortality. Todd Street is this evil existence which goes on beyond life and death. And now to really conclude, believe me or not, just two examples just to make it clear to you, or there are many other examples from cinema, from stories and so on. Now let me read you, I'm sorry that's in English, an entire fairy tale. Don't be afraid, it's just 6-7 lines. Maybe you know it, it's the shortest of Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm's fairy tales. I forgot, I think only in English. It's called, in English, The Willful Child. You know, it's just a couple of lines. I will read it to you. Okay, don't be afraid, sorry. Once upon a time, there was a child who was willful and did not do what his mother wanted. For this reason, God was displeased with him and caused him to become ill, and no doctor could help him, and in a short time, he lay on his deathbed. He was lowered into a grave and covered with earth, but his little arm suddenly came forth and reached up. And it didn't help when they put it back in and put fresh earth over it. The little arm always came out again. So the mother herself had to go to the grave and beat the little arm with a stick, blah, blah, blah. But you know, this mere insistence, it's like, don't you have this wonderful German story of the two Max and Moritz, the two, isn't it that when they died there, I think in some mill for grain, but then the indication is that when they are turned just into dust, the dust still has the form of their grinning faces. And they are so evil that, or, you know, this is Todd Street.